Marco Polo, His Travels and Adventures, Chapter 7, Part 1, The Court of the Great Khan. It was a grand sight to see the vast multitude of courtiers, soldiers, nobles, ladies, and attendants as it crowded the highway as far as eye could reach, and spread itself out over the plain beyond Shandu. As Marco gazed on the immense procession, including thousands upon thousands of swarthy Tartars, attired in every variety of gay and brilliant costume, it seemed to him as if a great city of people were emptying itself and had risen bodily to move to a new sight. On one side he saw a long train of large elephants, so long that he could not see the end of it in the distance, each elephant adorned with heavy embroidered trappings and lofty palanquins, and some of them bearing huge bales of goods and provisions. Nearby was another train, composed entirely of camels and dromedaries, which strode off in their patient, sober way, bearing also their heavy burdens. Of troops of horses, some mounted by the fierce Tartar cavalry, with their long mustaches, their rude helmets, their huge yagatans, and their long, limber spears, others bearing packages, others dragging heavy weapons, and yet others strode by gorgeously dressed nobles. There seemed to be no end. In the midst of the great multitude was the Khan's corps of kennel keepers, holding dogs in the leads by the dozen. And here and there were to be seen the moving cages containing the Khan's big menagerie, his lions and tigers, his leopards and foxes, his eagles, hawks, and falcons. The din that arose from this immense number of people was sometimes deafening. The departure was announced by much blowing of shrill trumpets and by the beating of flat drums, and from the midst of the many groups of women, the ladies and slaves of the Khan and his principal courtiers, proceeded the weird songs of Cathay which had so startled Marco when he first reached the Khan's hunting grounds. He wondered very much how it was that the officers kept so innumerable a host in anything like good order, for he observed that, in spite of the apparent confusion, the vast caravanserai advanced in regular sections, each body of men and women keeping the place in the procession in which it had set out. In the midst of his subjects went, in magnificent state, Kublai Khan himself. He was perched on the back of an enormous white elephant, down whose huge leathery sides hung drapiers of cloth of gold and silver, worked with the symbols of the Buddhist faith in many dazzling colors. Above these draperies appeared a splendid pavilion, supported by slender and beautifully carved pillars of sandalwood and other aromatic woods. It was curtained in the richest silk. Above it rose a little dome plated with silver and surmounted by many brilliant plumes that waved and nodded high in the air. Within the pavilion was a throne, which was one blaze of burnished gold, and which was supplied with a large soft cushion, as large and soft as a feather bed. Its arms were carved tiger heads, the eyes of the tigers being immense emeralds, and upon this throne sat, or rather reclined, the mighty monarch of Cathay. It was a fine opportunity to observe this famous warrior and king. Of middle height and build, Kublai Khan's dark complexion was yet clear and creamy, and on his cheeks a faint flush lent a rich color to his expressive features. His form was perfect in its proportions. He seemed to have been cast in the finest mold of men. He was at once lithe and athletic, strong of muscle, quick and nervous in motion. His large, dark eyes shone at once with energy and kindliness. His nose, not large and thick, as were those of most of his countrymen, was straight and bold. His lips were thick and sensuous, but beautifully outlined and full of expression. A short, shiny black beard, just tinged with gray, depended from his round chin, and a narrow black mustache adorned his upper lip. In his ears hung long earrings of tear-shaped pearls, and his robe and turban were of the heaviest and glossiest silk. On a cushion, on one side of the khan, reposed a beautiful young girl, one of the most recent and well-beloved of his many wives, while on the other side of the throne, and chained to its leg, sat a small but handsomely spotted leopard, the khan's favorite pet. All around the elephant that bore the khan were other elephants which carried his wives and principal courtiers, who were being constantly fanned by their dusky slaves with fans made of peacock's feathers and fastened to long poles that reached from the ground to the palanquins on the elephants' backs. The journey from the imperial hunting grounds to Kambalu, the capital of Cathay, occupied several weeks, for the two places were some hundreds of miles apart. The Khan and his caravanserai went leisurely, for there was ample time before them. They halted 3 or 4 times each day and timed their progress so as to reach some large town at nightfall. No sooner did they reach a town than they found every preparation made to receive them. Vast tents were spread, luxurious feasts loaded down long tables within some of them, while in others beds were arranged for the repose of all. The journey thus seemed no hardship at all, but a delightful excursion. The country through which Marco passed was for the most part beautiful. Sometimes the caravanserai passed across tedious deserts and plains, or rank and dangerous jungles, but they usually found themselves winding through lovely valleys with a rich vegetation all about them, and wide-spreading trees that afforded a delicious shade from the sun's rays. As they approached Kambalu one bright afternoon, the whole population of the capital seemed to empty itself out to receive them. There was a commingling of two vast multitudes. Relatives and friends greeted each other with the wildest demonstrations of delight, and as the Khan passed by, the people of the city prostrated themselves all along the road in his august presence. Nothing, thought Marco, could exceed the grandeur of the palace in which, by the invitation of the Khan, he now took up his quarters. That at Shandu had amazed him, but it seemed insignificant indeed when he compared it with this noble edifice, which was comprised in a square a mile on each side, and whose walls rose high above all the surrounding houses. These walls themselves supported buildings which, together, composed a part of the imperial abode. At their 4 corners were spacious towers, in which were kept the bows, arrows, yataghans and spears, the bridles and saddles, the helmets and breastplates which comprised the Khan's implements of war. Midway between these were other towers, which contained the enormous stores needed for the support of the court. In the vast space, a mile square, enclosed within the walls, were several groups of spacious buildings, some used for the wardrobes, others for the plate and other movable articles, while in the midst of these stood the imperial palace itself, its roof rising high above the rest.